Alright, what's up? Just going to be going over some early game stunners today, or stunning in general for all the classic levels, talking about why they're good, why they're bad. So to start off, you got, I would say, your baseline stunners being Sparky and Fury, right? They're pretty good stuns, pretty accessible in the early game, pretty useful throughout most of the earlier stages, and they just serve to stall enemies for a little bit. They can't achieve anywhere close to a permastall, but they do a pretty good job of delaying enemy advances, and I definitely recommend using them when you are trying to do those early levels, right? Some stuns I would not recommend using for earlier levels and levels in general would be Clyde and Rocky. Both of these only stun for 2 seconds, and their stuns rather inconsistent, right? Clyde only stuns for 2 seconds on a single target, while Rocky only stuns for 2 seconds. He is able to do group targets, but the Rock won't be able to hit all the enemies, right? As you see, the enemies were delayed for a lot less time because Rocky was only able to hit a small group of enemies rather than all the enemies in his range, which is rather, rather short, right? So they're both going to be stuns that you want to try and avoid, even though they're easily accessible. If you're missing a third, fourth, fifth stun, whatever, put them in, but it's never a good case scenario when you have to put them in, right? Ice Mocha, pretty good stun. Solid attack speed, so solid, like, better ability cast speed, I would say. 3 second stun is also better than 2 second. So Ice Mocha can be used as Cappuccino. Doesn't need to be the evolved form, but yeah, Cappuccino can be used as a decent single target stun that is a little bit better than Clyde, also pretty easy to access. Another good stun, I'd say, that is really accessible is Teddy, right? I believe he's a guaranteed epic to get in the early game, and a 3 second AoE stun is really nice because it is able to delay enemies pretty well, and it also will hit, multiple groups of enemies. So I definitely recommend using Teddy, and I'd recommend possibly using Cappuccino if you are in a situation where you're looking for single target stuns, but they're both pretty good to use, can't really go wrong with them. Next up, you got Yeti, and you got let's find someone here. Let's use Yeti and Chili here. I'd say Yeti is a stun that's these two stuns, they're both ice stuns, and I say they aren't used that frequently compared to other stuns, right? Yeti is only able to stun enemies in front of him, so again, you have that same situation where you won't be hitting a massive group of enemies and it'll only be doing 2 seconds, so he's not that great of a stun despite being higher rarity than most of the other monsters. While Chili, I feel, can be a decent stun because it is AoE. Only hits a small group of enemies though, and so again, similar situation as Rocky, where not all the enemies around Chili will be getting hit, but the stun duration is not bad, and you could definitely use Chili as a decent stun, especially in elemental challenges. I'd say Chili can be a good stun in Volcano Goddess, but we're just talking about classic levels here, and so Yeti and Chili are going to be rather mediocre stuns to the classic levels, especially Yeti being pretty bad, Chili being, really in the middle there. Next up, you start getting into your better stuns here. You got Frostbite and you got Ash. Both these guys are 4 second stuns and capable of doing AoE stuns, making them pretty strong overall. Frostbite is able to hit enemies with a beam, while Ash is sort of like an upgraded Rock, doubled stun duration, but with that same sort of throwing mechanic, not able to hit all the enemies. I'd say these are both like really solid stuns. Despite them not being able to do full AoE, I'd still recommend using them just because they do have such long stun durations, and they will be able to delay enemies for quite a bit because of that 4 second stun duration. So I definitely recommend using them. And again, not trying to get into this too much, but they can be pretty solid in elemental challenges too because of their element and because of their stun duration. Next up, you have Lightning, not Sparky, and you have Slime King, right? Lightning is going to be a pretty decent stun. Again, same sort of mechanic as Ash and Rocky, except Lightning does have, better attack speed here, so Lightning is a little bit better of a stun than those guys, I think, and also Lightning is able to do a little bit more damage. So I'd recommend using him as just a decent stunner overall, right? Able to get some faster attacks, able to get some lightning damage as well. Yeah, not bad stunner, but there are better stunners out there. Just another mid-tier stunner. The reason I remove Slime King here is because I feel Slime King is a really, really good stun that you should definitely try and use as you get him. Not only as a carry, but as a stun as well, right? A full map 2 second stun that does damage is very, very good. He's able to delay enemies by a lot. He's able to cast pretty frequently. And overall, Slime King is just going to be one of the best stuns in the game. You can backline him, you can midline him. He's useful throughout most of the game after you get him, just because 2 second stun, you can't really go wrong with it. He's delaying a lot of enemies here. He's delaying all the enemies here, and I definitely recommend using him as a stun. All right, next up, these are going to be most of the stunners that are obtainable in the early game. Slime King is not Oh, sorry, not most of the stunners that are obtainable in the early game, but most of the stunners that, you know, you can upgrade in the early game if you do want to do that. Just most of the cheap units, right? But now going into some more expensive units, maybe some rare units, you got the Archangels, right? You got Blue Archangel and Yellow Archangel. These two, along with Pony Sparks, which I'll go over in a second, are both really great stuns in the early to mid game. Again, nice AoE stuns, all hit enemies, good stun duration, different effects as well, retain. Yeah, they're still good throughout the elemental challenges because they have an element attached to them. Again, pretty solid stuns. Not going to be as good as Slime King because they're not full map, but they do a really good job. Definitely recommend using them throughout pretty much any stage of the game. You get them as a stun. All right, next up, we get into the special units here. A little bit more difficult to obtain. The stuns I'd recommend using here, not Cronus. I'd say Cronus is a really bad stun who really isn't able to do much and contribute much with his ice. Mummy King spits out what looks like, honestly, vomit, but that vomit doesn't even CC people. It doesn't slow them. It just does damage. I guess Cronus can provide somewhat of a decent stun. Still wouldn't really recommend using him. Again, you can just achieve the same sort of stun with Archangels, and its Archangels are also easier to obtain as well. And, you know, they may or may not stun for a longer or shorter amount of time, but it's pretty much the same, pretty much easier to obtain. Cronus is just pretty bad overall, I'd say. Next up, we get into a really solid stun being not Blitz Charger, Pony Sparks. Keep calling her Blitz Charger, but Pony Sparks can be a really solid stun because it does chain and damage. Not in the visual way that Zeus does, but it just hits multiple enemies, can hit the enemies around Blitz Charger, and is able to be a pretty solid stun overall, which I would recommend using. Getting into probably what I think is, again, one of the best stuns in the game would be Archimedes, right? Archimedes is a full map stun. Yeah, I probably can't even showcase the stun here just because I have the evolved version, which is able to do damage with her ability, so she'll just end up one-shotting everyone here. But she is able to do really solid stuns. Very similar situation as Slime King. If you're wondering how good she is purely as a stunner, pretty much the same thing as Slime King because it is a nice 2-second freeze on all enemies, full map, and gonna be a really strong stun, and as you see here, a really strong carry as well. All right, going into Mythic Monsters, these are gonna be a little bit more difficult to obtain, but Mythic Monsters can be really good stuns and really good CC in general, right? You have Bastet. Not gonna show her off now. She is lacking a lot of buffs right now. I don't think she's in a very complete stage yet, so I wouldn't like to showcase her right now, just because, you know, I feel like she's an unfinished Mythic who will be receiving buffs soon. But apart from that, Zeus is going to be a really solid stun. Again, I can't really show it off here just because Zeus will be one-shotting everything. Oh, not one-shotting everything. But yeah, as you see here, it's a nice chain stun, very brief stun. I believe Zeus is the current monster in the game right now that is able to achieve the closest thing to a permanent stun, right? Zeus is able to achieve very nice stuns even on big groups of enemies. It's basically able to hit all of the enemies as long as the lightning itself is in a decent range of them. Next up, you have the Jiraiya, right? Jiraiya does a nice full map slow. Won't be able to show it off here because Jiraiya will be one-shotting everything, but a nice slow. Again, basically the full map because of Jiraiya's massive range. Definitely recommend using him as a carry, as a CC. You know, whichever works better for you. But I think that's pretty much most of the stuns in the game that are going to be worthwhile to check out, worthwhile to use. Some are worthwhile to avoid. Yeah, if this helped, like, subscribe, and see ya.